Health data research is changing fast. New standards, new infrastructure, and new AI capabilities are reshaping what researchers can do, but also what institutions need to put in place to support them responsibly. Trusted Research Conversations is a podcast from Iridia for the people navigating this change. I'm Ross Stiven, your host, the Senior Product Manager here at Iridia, and in each episode, I'll be speaking to guests from across the research, clinical, and technology communities, discussing the practical realities of secure data research, federated analysis, AI governance, and the standards and regulations that underpin it all. Our guest this week is Antti Kettunen, the founder of Veridient. Antti, thanks very much for joining us here in Trusted Research Conversations. Obviously, you're here to talk about digital identity, but generally speaking, we let our guests introduce themselves and their work at the start. So if you could just give everyone a little bit of your background and what you're working on at present, that'd be great. And then we'll move on to the main topic of our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ross, and really appreciate being here, being able to talk with you on this. So my name is Antti Kettunen. I am the founder of Veridient. Veridient is an independent boutique consultancy. We have deep expertise in digital identity and digital ecosystems. And especially during the past couple of years, we've been mostly focusing on digital identity wallets in the EU, trust services and ecosystem design. And really, why I found Veridient is that the future of European digitalization really is centered around digital trust and identity. And I do believe that ecosystems are really at the center of everything. And we're seeing this happening, especially now that we're seeing a lot of the agentic AI development coming in. A lot of the AI advancements are in there. And I think even though the infrastructure is not there yet supporting all of this on the public adoption side or the infrastructure side, I really truly believe that the next years, even decades, will be focusing on this European infrastructure, European ecosystems. And yeah, that's going to be really great to see in the future how that's going to be going. But yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think, I think we couldn't agree more on that. I think there are a lot of exciting developments, particularly around agentic AI and the things that might be possible there. But I think the key word you used, I think, was perhaps ecosystems, and like we're not there in a widespread and coherent way. I don't know, like perhaps like the foundations to really make the full use of this technology are not in place. And I think as we're going to discuss, perhaps digital identity is one of the things that will really help kind of unlock that potential in a much more widespread way. So on that note, perhaps the best thing to do now would be to talk about that project. So the EU digital identity.
Yeah. I love to really start from the beginning of EUDI and where it came from. And I think it's a good starting point to understand that, like I mentioned, the ecosystems are really the key thing. And at the base of ecosystems, there's always infrastructure. There's shared infrastructure that you use one way or another. And there's also shared governance. And EHDS is a regulation in EU that builds this governance. So EHDS is called the Electronic Identification, Authentication, and Trust Services. And it originally was passed in 2014. So 2014, and it was focused back then more on the public sector cross-border authentication, but it also included some trust services you may know of, like qualified signatures or seals that you may be using. But 24, we saw a major amendment, and this amendment brought in the European Digital Identity Framework, which defined the EU Digital Identity Wallet. And the EUDI wallet is part of a wider push by the European Commission. And what it does, the Commission is trying to strengthen the sovereignty and trust of the EU digital market, the digital single market. And this is really one of the key cornerstones, is to be able to have really trustworthy systems, trustworthy infrastructure, that whether you are coming from Finland or Spain or Italy, you know that these parties are trustworthy. There are protocols and standards that support this development and support the adoption in general. Okay. So yeah, the goal is really to build digital infrastructure. which will support then wide range of use cases and ecosystems. And as really part of that, as a core part of that, you need to have very strong electronic identification and trust services as major part of that.
Yeah. So the objective, if I've understood it properly, then is that there'll be essentially every EU citizen will have one of these digital identity wallets, and that will allow them to interact not just with services in their own country, but also across the whole bloc. And you used quite an interesting word there, or certainly a hot topic at present, which is the idea of sovereignty, which is obviously taking on much more of a prominence that I think any of us could have imagined like 3 or 4 years ago. So that's perhaps something that we should explore later on as well, because I think that's a potentially interesting aspect of it too. But yeah, so if you could talk a little bit about what the objective here, I think everyone can understand and everyone can get behind, is you want to be able to travel, you want to be able to interact with different systems. How do we get there, right? What are the implementation steps towards that? What's the project doing right now? Like how is it operating?
Yeah, so really in the EUDI wallet ecosystem, the key and the focal point is the wallet itself. So there are multiple different roles, multiple different entities and systems that are actually interacting there. But really the focal point is the wallet. And what the wallet is, it's you have your Apple wallets, you have your Google wallets, you pay with those. In the States, you can also show your driver's license. It's pretty much the same thing, but put that into the EU context and in the context of the trusted infrastructure. Because what we want, we have very strong baseline of privacy regulations, and we're very strong on that sovereignty part, meaning that we want to be sure that the people themselves, citizens, are able to control their data. They can explicitly define that who can get my data, and it's not being passed around and made money with. So really that's at the core here. And using the wallet, now, like you said, every citizen of EU will have a free digital identity wallet. They will have it during the next year or so. Mm-hmm. And using the wallet, citizens are able to authenticate themselves with high level of assurance. This is the highest form of assurance and authentication you can do. You can do that in every EU member state. Mm-hmm. And that's really the cool part. You don't need to anymore have try to find who is the service provider that can provide this national authentication capabilities and use your passport then, but you can use fully digital solutions to authenticate to, let's say, you move to Spain and I would want to do that with my Finnish wallet. I can do that, use my Finnish identity and log into the Spanish government systems, for example. And in addition to that authentication capability, I will have a digital signature capability. So I can sign documents using my wallet. And I can also receive and present what's called the electronic attestations of attributes. Some may know this as verifiable credentials. So they're essentially cryptographically verifiable proofs. The same way as I can get a document, I can get a license that has holograms, that has security features that can be verified and validated by somebody who knows how to verify and validate that. Now I can have that. In a digital format in a secure wallet that I myself control, and I know that that data is not being leaked over. So that's really the key there is that I will have this kind of very private, personal, secure wallet system, and I can use that to authenticate, sign, and transfer data, get those credentials, and present those, and so that the relying parties can really verify that I'm who I say I am, or I'm representing somebody else, or something like that.
So that's you've somewhat answered the question I was about to ask you there with the final statement, but I'm going to ask anyway, because maybe you can elucidate slightly. So the verifiable credentials, I think, is an interesting thing. So what, I don't know if there are any kind of immediate use cases here. I don't know if there are perhaps things that are already in train, but what sort of things will be verifiable there? Are we talking about sort of like professional status, or is it more fundamental than that? Like what sort of verifiable credentials do you expect people will have in their ID wallets?
Oh yeah, so there the actual EUDI regulate or EIDS regulation itself defines only what's called the person identification data or person identity data, which is the authentication credential, if you will. But in addition to that, you can essentially form ecosystems or even come up with yourself any type of credential or attestation that may be useful. Now, the ones that we know that are coming at some point in time is that there's mobile driver's license. That's kind of a given. You want
that makes sense.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's been worked on. That you'll have the mobile driver's license at some point. There's been large-scale pilots where you have like tens and even 200 organizations doing different kinds of testings of how you use the wallets. And for example, the European, the EHIC, the HIIC, the European Healthcare Insurance Card is one of those that has been tested around. Different kinds of social insurance cards. Even payment authorizations have been tried out. Travel documentation, this kind of advanced traveler information has been used there. So a lot of different kind of applications, a lot of different kind of use cases, and industries are trying this out. So there's a lot of opportunities, and it's really about finding what are the sort of the high value use cases that we start with.
I mean, it's interesting here in particular because this discussion is really only getting started in Britain. There's you probably won't be familiar with this, right? But there is right now quite a big advertising campaign in the UK around trying to encourage, I guess, like a public discussion around digital identity and the sort of uses for it. So it's kind of interesting to hear where the EU implementation of this is just like that bit further down the road, I think from that people will get an idea of what the purpose of the project is, right? Everyone will have their own wallet. That wallet will be interoperable with systems across the continent, right? It may be worth talking a little bit about how the implementation of this is actually being done, because as I understand it, it's actually at a national level. So it might be kind of interesting to talk a little bit about that before we move on to our more specific interests.
Like I said, that the regulation is EU-wide, but the implementation is member state specific. So there are a few roles that the member states are required to do, or they're sort of responsible for. So right now, national level, what we're doing is that each of the member states is working on bringing the first wallet. So the member state must decide if they will build their own wallet or if they will let private sector parties do their own wallets that they will then approve of. And then they will also do the PID issuer, so essentially the issuing that authentication device. So when you have that certified wallet, so you need to certify the wallet. You cannot just bring in anything. If a Google or Apple brings in their wallet and says we want to be an EUDI wallet, they need to go through the same certification procedures that everybody else. They also need to open up their wallet source code. So because you need to have an open source code base there. So that's very interesting.
That is interesting. That is interesting. Obviously, the EU is, a big place, hundreds of millions of citizens, dozens of member states. If this is being done on a country by country basis, I mean, would it be fair to say that probably everybody is not quite at the same level of maturity, or is there a kind of is everybody kind of ready to roll these out sort of this year or next year? I don't know what the kind of the continent-wide picture is.
So there's the development happens in few layers. There's the you're right that the member states are developing sort of the operational layer, that they're implementing all the different roles, the protocols. Then there's a lot of still defining and specification happening on the standards bodies. So there's a lot of, for example, ETSI is one of the main standards bodies that is developing standards for this, because we're talking about the decentralized architecture, which means that we rely on standards and protocols to everybody to implement the same way. Otherwise, we cannot make it interoperable. Yes. So we have that, and the Commission and the member states together are really working on creating those specifications. So from maturity perspective, there's obviously many member states will have let's say a long road to take to get to the maturity level needed. But the good part is that really this work that we're doing right now takes and raises up everybody to the same baseline. So it really it doesn't matter if, like I mentioned, that Finland has been doing this from the 90s. We've had strong authentication from the 90s already. but we're on the same level once we get to the EUDI wallet space. So everybody will be on the same level, and I do think that really what this does is it raises the baseline of trust in Europe. And that's really the key, is that we raise we don't have those peaks and valleys anymore, but we level it out. We raise that baseline to a very high level, and that is a terrific place to start to develop an ecosystem. There's a lot of work to do, obviously, for all member states, but during the now late 26, early 27, a lot of the member states have said that they cannot necessarily meet the original deadline of December 26, but they will come out in January 27. Okay. So right now it seems that we're going to get our EUDI wallets coming around December 26 to January 27. So I think that's a terrific goal right now.
So it's a very imminent thing, really. I mean, it's less than a year away. Okay, I think you've given everyone, I think, a good overview there of what the project is and what the broad principles of it are, and what kind of things users can expect to do with it, right? What kind of advantages people can gain, right, from having this digital wallet, and how it can be used to underpin technological ecosystems. So I think it would be, from our perspective, it would be interesting to talk a bit more about one of those particular ecosystems, right, which is the health data space, right, the European health data space. So obviously, you and I came to know one another through working on that sort of project, right? So we worked on STEMS, which is an ongoing project about building data sharing infrastructure between hospitals in different EU countries. So it'd be interesting to discuss how do you think something like the digital ID wallet plays in a space like the European health data space? Like, how does it help bring that into reality, right? How does everyone having their own digital ID help us build these really useful cross-border health data sharing infrastructures?
Oh yeah. This is a really good question. So, like I said, that we're talking here about building the base of the infrastructure for the infrastructures with EHDS, and now EHDS and these kind of healthcare industry ecosystems. They are verticals. They are vertical data spaces, vertical ecosystems, and although you could create these same kinds of infrastructures for each industry, it doesn't make sense. Like you said, the EU it's a huge area, and we want to make sure that we have a common infrastructure. So we're building now the EHDS infrastructure, and the EHDS is going to be using it as it sees fit. And what I think is really important is here to understand we're giving the citizens a tool that they can use in different ecosystems. So right now, instead of taking let's say a healthcare wallet, you can just use your wallet that you use, and you can present information in the healthcare data space. And because the EHDS really deals with primary use of data, secondary use of data, and also then the EHR systems, the electronic health record systems. What you're missing there is, well, how is the citizen there? I mean, it's really hard to build a system where a citizen feels that they're really a natural part of that. With the EUDI wallet, you can think that you already have the citizen endpoint. You already have that wallet there, which is interoperable, as long as the EHDS is interoperable with the EHDS wallets. So you have a very natural use of each other's resources and each other's purposes there, because then in this case, research organizations and healthcare organizations can use the EUDI wallets and all the protocols, all the attestations, the authentications, the signature methods. They can use all of that on a very high assurance level, use that in the healthcare space. So then it's really about, well, if you want to share recipes, then you can issue that as an attestation to the EUDI wallet. If you want to make sure that are you actually a healthcare professional, you would request that when you're applying for a job, that, hey, please provide us with an attestation of your healthcare diplomas, etc. So you really, what you have is you have a very versatile tool set and infrastructure that you can use in any these kinds of situations, whether that's for professionals, whether that's in research cases, whether that's applying for consent, applying for just even receiving your diagnosis and just presenting that into a different country. You're away on a holiday and you break your leg or get some other type of diagnosis there. So you want that data to take with you. You want that data to be that you're authenticated properly, et cetera. So that's sort of where the interface is.
I mean, that's interesting. And I think we'll maybe move on in a minute to talk about the possible benefits of this for researchers in that sort of secondary use space. But I mean, is one of the objectives here, when we look at it from a citizen's perspective, is one of the objectives here to give them control of their own data? So right now, I don't know how many gigabytes of data there may be out there about me, right, within the health system, right, wherever I've interacted with it. But it's very difficult when we talk about research. It's very difficult for me to know, is that data being used? Who's using it? So there's something like the digital ID wallet is the ultimate objective of that I could have more control over these uses of my data. Is that a potential benefit of this approach, this project?
Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right. And I do want to emphasize that I don't think that the wallet will be sort of let's say a container for health data. That's not the point. It's not the point that I gather everything, all of my data into one single honeypot and then I feel secure. No, It's more about how do I assert control over this. It's same thing like the sovereignty part. Yes. The sovereignty part is not about me having everything to myself, but me having control over that information, wherever that may be. Yeah. So they're really the data as it is. It's really important that they're being handled by the safe stewards, in this case, the healthcare providers and all other similar parties. And for me to be able to assert my control, my will over that information. And those are two different things. And I think that's really important. That's sort of what we're doing in EHDS is we're enabling those kinds of tools where I can assert what's my will over this information and who wants to use this, and I can give permission for that, or I can sign consents or whatnot. So yeah, absolutely, that's major part of that. And in some cases, I do wish that, hey, maybe I'll have that information to take with me. Maybe I want that insurance information to take with me. Maybe I want that recipe or that just proof that I have a certain illness or something like that with me. So in certain cases, I could use my wallet to also exchange data and prove that I have something. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it's going to be used in this space, because there's just huge amount of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's a good way of thinking about it. It's not that you're carrying about this like digital treasure trove of your own data. It's more that you now have a means of authenticating with various systems that contain data about you, and therefore you have a legitimate way of interacting with them and perhaps being a more active participant in the decisions about how that data is made. Is that a reasonable characterization?
Very, very well put. Very well.
Okay. Well, thank you. You're the first person I think ever to say that, but thanks. So yeah, I think that's I don't think that's too hard of a sell, right? I think most people anyone who's spent any time interacting with like any sort of like bureaucratic governmental online system, I think can see the benefit of one set of proof that allows you to interact with multiple systems. Now, obviously a lot's riding on the building of those multiple systems, but as you've said, this is a supporting layer, right? This is an enabling layer that lets that vertical be built, right? So just let's talk a little bit more about EHDS, because obviously that's kind of where our interest is, right? We're a provider of what we would call a trusted research environment, but which I think the EHDS would define as a secure processing environment. So clearly, and again, right, you will likely know more about this than I do, so feel free to correct anything that I'm not getting quite right here. But like fundamentally, the way that EHDS sort of suggests the ecosystem should be set up is that you will have health data access bodies who could be sort of national or regional level sort of data custodians. I think, that's the kind of foundation layer of the EHDS. Is that kind of fair to say?
I'm not a deep expert in EHDS myself, so these are disclaimers now. Then I may get this as well. So from what I understood and what I remember when I was looking through all of this information a while ago already, is that the form of EHDS is more closely related to how EHDS 1 was, where you had those central nodes and central nodes and who are communicating with each other and exchanging that data, and that's sort of one of the primary use cases of what EHDS is doing. You would have those HDAPs, health data access bodies, governing that area. That was the only case. Obviously, that is a very robust system that needs to be built, and it will take time. It will take a lot of money and effort to actually build that. But I don't think it's the only way of doing those. So there, what you would be building with those nodes would be really the European-wide health data exchange.
Yes. But
like we did in FEMS in the pediatric health data space, that was an example of a data space that would be, in a way, it would be part of the EHDS regulation as well, but it would be able to do things differently because it was governed with its own governance model, with its own contractual system, and it also had the public sector bodies and healthcare providers within that. And that is also even though you could use the EUDI wallet with the sort of the node-based EHDS system, you would be able to do that to authenticate to the node, to your own healthcare provider, to your, let's say, another country's healthcare provider. That's not a problem. But then also, you would be able to use it with these kind of smaller ecosystems like the pediatric health data space for research. And there, you could do that as, let's say, you could do that as a researcher. As a researcher, you would be very interested in being able to get simple access to multiple from data from multiple hospitals from different countries, especially if you have a rare disease. You're studying rare disease. That was the sort of point in FEMS. And the key point there was, how do we make the permit process simpler? And the permit process is really it's grounded in different kinds of authentications, different kinds of permit managements, consent managements, just getting those sort of governance steps that you need to do in order to get any kind of access, whether that's secondary, in this case it was secondary material. In this case, the EUDI wallet, again, it provides you with a tool as a researcher to be able to do those cross-border and make that digitally, given that obviously if the hospitals and organizations have that as a digital process, but you as you actually already have a tool, and the PHDS in this case, they don't need to create a wallet. They can rely on your existing wallets.
Absolutely.
So then it's really about plugging your own ecosystem to the EUDI ecosystem, saying that, hey, we're issuing these kinds of data access permits. We're issuing these kinds of consents, or citizens can give consent to our ecosystem, et cetera. So that's, I think that's really a brilliant thing, is that the more we are seeing, we're going to be seeing the adoption in different ecosystems and industries, the more useful the EUDI wallet will become. So it's going to be really, really super interesting.
No, I think it's been a learning experience discovering how difficult it can be for researchers to get access to their data. I should say more accurately, the data that they need to perform their research, right? That can be really difficult. And as you said yourself, when it's rare diseases, it's very difficult to find all the data you need within one country, right, or one organization. So you are looking at dealing with multiple jurisdictions with their own authentication methods, with their own policies, their own procedures. So the more of that stack you can solidify, right, provide a degree of conformity, then the easier it becomes for these transactions to take place. So I think there is a real tangible prize there, right? And then perhaps the PHDS is a very good example of that, right? Because we have hospitals from multiple countries collaborating on rare diseases, right? And they can do that on that basis of trust. But it's been a grind to get there. And if you can start from a much higher base where everyone has a common ID and everyone has a common way of interacting with that, it doesn't solve every problem, right?
But it makes it a lot easier.
Well, but it certainly solves some of them, right? So yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting moment, right, in all of this, and I'm really interested to see how it plays out. Let's end on an optimistic note, right? I don't think we've yet ended on a doom-laden note, but let's today end on an optimistic note. What's your best hope for this, right? Let's say 5 years from now. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be specifically in the health space, but what's the best case scenario for the digital ID project, right? What does that look like from a citizen's perspective or a researcher's perspective or whatever? What's the place we can get to in 5 years that's good?
That is a terrific question. And in 5 years, I would love to see that we have gained major adoption. And by major adoption, I would say that we would get 60 to even, dare I say, 80% of people in Europe have some kind of use with the EUDI wallet. And why I think it's possible is that this becomes at a very opportune time, and many of the major member states like Germany, France, Italy are really pushing for this. And this is not something that's been left. It's really a spearhead initiative. And I really think that if we play our cards right, and things like the mobile driver's license, if that comes in a few years, I don't know exactly the timeline when it will come. And if we start to see other types of use cases, whether those are different kinds of travel credentials, whether they are payment authorizations, if the payment providers will start to take on that, each and every one of those will increase the adoption rate. And I really hope that in 5 years, we have a surprisingly large amount of people using this. Obviously, it's not going to be mandatory for everybody. And so maybe I'm too optimistic in that 80%, but with 60% in Europe, I would be so happy with this. And I think it will just have a steady growth with that. So obviously anything can happen, and it can really go down and be a huge mess at the end of it. But I'm optimistic. And in 5 years, I would say 60%, that's our goal.
I think we'll call that an optimistic note to end on. Antti, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.